StoryBook Gardens in London, Ontario, Canada, opened in 1958 in the heart of Springbank Park. It is an amusement park for the younger folks, featuring a few fairground rides, a carousel, a miniature train, various play areas and structures, a splash pad, and puppet and sing-along shows throughout the day. It once housed a petting zoo and other animals, including sea lions, but the version we see today has been around since 2003 when it underwent a major refurbishment. For a day out in the sun with relatively young kids, it's actually really quite fun, but you can definitely tell that it's harking back to a past glory, as most of the recent reviews will agree. So join me as I rebuild digitally this little piece of local history and reimagine it for the 21st century. This is Saving Storybook. Hello you, welcome to Geekism and welcome to Saving Storybook, a new series here for Planet Coaster 2. Now, those of you who follow the channel religiously, thank you so much. You'll be waiting for Meanderville, which is my larger, sort of my magnum opus, I guess, my big project for Planet Coaster 2. I have been working on that and it is coming along slowly. Unfortunately, the game isn't quite letting me do what I want it to do, and also I really want a sort of smaller, more manageable series to kind of fill in the gaps of Meanderville as well. So Meanderville is going to be a much larger project with higher production value as well, and I still wanted to have something on the channel that was just time lapses of me playing the game, because I know a lot of people still really dig that too. So I've had an idea for the longest time of doing some sort of recreation. It isn't something that I've really been able to do in the game before. I struggle and get a little bit sort of stuck creatively when trying to do a straight-up one-for-one recreation. And it wasn't until I was talking to a friend of mine about StoryBook Gardens here in London, Ontario, where I live, and they said, "Oh, it's really cute, but it isn't what it used to be." And I don't really know it's what it used to be, because I've only been in the country, let alone the city, for about 5 years now, maybe coming up 6. And I've visited this place a lot with Xander, my son, and I really quite enjoyed it, and I thought it was a lovely thing for a city like this to have. But I was a little upset that he's kind of aged out of it a little bit now. He's coming up 8 this summer. And a lot of the attractions here are much more focused to a younger crowd. I would say probably 6 is probably the sort of top age for a lot of the stuff that's here. There's a little play village, a little village made up of wooden structures that children can play in. There's a go-kart track, but it's just sort of like pedal go-karts on some concrete. There is a splash pad that is very good, actually, and Xander still does enjoy that, to be honest with you, because it's just a good splash pad. And then there are a few very simple flat rides. There is a carousel. There is a little Dumbo elephant thing that just sort of spins around, a little Ferris wheel, but really not much in the way of rides. Certainly nothing that you would class as like a credit or anything like that. And I always thought, oh, wouldn't it be great if somebody just came in and gave this place like 30 million and just sort of pushed it up to that next level, gave it a little family coaster, a handful of flat rides, perhaps the area that is currently just a walk around attraction where there are the play buildings and the go-kart area that would make a great little vintage car ride, and I just love the idea of it. And then it was when I was looking for something to do in Planet Coaster alongside Meanderville that I thought maybe this could be my first sort of shot at a recreation, because it won't be a full-on recreation. It will be a recreation plus. We will try and keep it to the scale and size of the actual thing, and we're going to be using a lot of the layout and the reference points as it is. But we're going to do that. Imagine it had 30 million put into it. Just imagine the City of London, who actually owns the place. It is not privately ran. It is owned by the local city council, and I don't know if it's necessarily run as a non-for-profit, but it certainly doesn't necessarily need to turn a profit. It is used as a just a good sort of community feature. All of the park's reports are put up, financial reports, so you can go and see that it's sort of making a profit enough to at least pay everybody, and that it isn't necessarily being used to sort of funnel money out of taxpayers' pockets or whatever. And it works out as something like a penny per taxpayer keeps this place open. It's kind of insane. So in some ways, it's a little disingenuous that I'm calling this series Saving Storybook, because it isn't particularly troublesome. It is, it opens every summer. It's always very busy whenever we've been, and for the most part, people still enjoy going and enjoy taking their children. They also do all of the seasonal activities that you would expect. They dress it all up for Halloween and do like a trick or treat through the place. And in the winter, they actually freeze the paths and open it as a ice skating sort of rink slash meander through the place. So it does well. As far as I know, it is financially stable. All I ever hear from people who are from the city or have been here a lot longer, and like I said, if you look online, you'll see a lot of the stuff as well. Most people saying that it just isn't what it used to be. And whilst what it used to be might have been amazing, I also want to think what it could look like, if it sort of had that sort of funding just to push it up to another thing that's not just the step up from a playground, basically, because that's the other problem I think StoryBook Gardens has. It has a really incredible splash pad. For those of you perhaps outside of North America, I know they're not super popular in the UK. A splash pad is an area that it's sort of flat, and it has lots of water spurting around. We built them in Planet Coaster 2 already as part of Plan Quatica. So if you don't really know what you're talking about, you can go and look at that. But basically, these are everywhere here in North America, and most sort of municipal parks will have one, just not to the sort of scale as Storybook's one, but a lot of them are getting really quite good. Any new ones that are put in are really quite fantastic, and the same can be said about just the general playground equipment as well. New playgrounds are just amazing. They're fantastic. They have multiple different sort of sensory areas. They have accessibility areas for people with mobility issues. There's just a real incredible amount of amazing community play space. So if all of that is out there and free at point of use, through city funding, why are you paying $15 to come into this, which is basically the same thing plus one or two extra attractions and a couple of flat rides that aren't even included in the ticket price? The ticket price is to get you through the door, and then there are tickets to use the flat rides. So I just wanted to try and imagine what it would be like if this place was sort of dragged up into the 21st century, and also sort of dragged up in an age way as well. Obviously still keeping a lot of stuff there for young children and toddlers, but having activities and rides there that will keep kids coming back here until they're sort of preteen age, opening basically a whole new clientele for the place just through having people continue to use the space as they grow older. Anyway, that's the point of the series. That's what I want to try and do. Basically, just imagine this place with an angel investment coming in and sort of just rejuvenating the place. For the most part, the actual park is it's clean and tidy, and it does everything it's trying to do relatively well. I just want to sort of imagine what it would be like with that shot of adrenaline, that shot in the arm that just sort of lifts it up to the sort of thing that not just locals are going to bring their kids to on a nice Sunday, but people from the Ontario area might actually travel to. And I thought that would be a good way of tackling a recreation, because whenever I've tried to do them in the past, they've never made it to the channel even. I've tried to do a few recreations, and I just get very stuck in the feel in the vibe that I'm just sort of copying, and I don't necessarily enjoy that creatively. Whereas here I'm using the actual real life thing as a blueprint for building off from, and then having some fun with sort of an extended budget and creative reach. So StoryBook Gardens then originally, like I said in the intro, did have animals. It had like a petting zoo. I'm not really against petting zoos, to be honest with you. I think for the most part, a lot of the animals there are really well kept, and it can help teach children about animal care and what have you. I think that's pretty good. Although it did also have things like sea lions and stuff, and I'm kind of glad that's no longer a thing, really, because I don't really think anything benefits from that happening, especially on this sort of scale, where there's not really any work being done regarding not repatriation, what's the word? Getting the sea lions back out into the wild or looking after endangered ones or whatever. They really were just here as a sideshow, come and look at the animals, which I wasn't, really a huge fan of. It's something from the 50s that is now long gone. So in many ways, I'm happy that the park has changed into what it is today. And I do wonder how many of the reviews that say, oh, it's not like what it used to be, are actually sort of, 60-year-old grandmas who liked coming to see the the animals who were most definitely depressed. So, so we won't be looking at doing anything like that. But I do want to try and lean into the other two aspects of the original park, which was the storybook and the gardens, both of which have honestly sort of fell aside, I feel, looking at older pictures of the place. The storybook aspect, there were a lot of sort of dioramas around of storybook characters. There was a lot of sort of just far enough away from Disney to not get sued. I don't want to say animatronics, they didn't really move, but there was, there'd be Humpty Dumptys around the place. There's a Cheshire Cat as you walk in. Some of them are still there, but they definitely feel like remnants, and that's something I would like to try and bring back to the park, is that real sort of feel of the storybook areas. There are a few different areas. The splash pad, I think, is just called Splash Zone. So what I would like to do in this version is make the splash pad actually lean into a sort of classic story, something like The Little Mermaid or something like that. There is a pirate play area that has a play area structure that looks like a pirate ship, or a ship at least, and that's about it. So I would like to lean into that and make that a little bit more piratey, sort of theme it towards Treasure Island. And then just other areas in general, there isn't really much of a feel or vibe to them or theme to them, so I'm hoping to kind of bring that back in with a bit of an extra budget. And then, like I said, the area that's currently just a sort of walk through town, and next to it is a go-kart track that has pedal go-karts. I just think that would make a beautiful little vintage car ride, and I've always actually wanted to do a beautiful little vintage car ride. It's weird that I've never really done one in the game or in Planet Coaster 1, really. Pinewood would have been perfect for it. Instead, we opted up for a little boat ride. So I'm really looking forward to doing a real sort of true classic vintage car ride that then goes through and past these little buildings that are currently there for the kids to wander around in, but they're just these little sheds that get like to 50 degrees in the summer. They're just not very fun. And there's one that's like a veterinarian clinic, and it's got like 3 dog stuffies that have just been thrown in there, and they look like they're older than me, and they're like covered in fleas, and so I just kind of want to use the space, use the vibe that they have there, but just sort of create better experiences in this sort of make-believe version of it. And if anybody from London City government ends up watching this and wants to give me 30 million to work with the team and do this in real life, my email is in the description. So we haven't really talked about what we're actually building here, so let's have a look at that. First of all, you'll see this absolute chunky ass rip-off Disney castle that is not from my mind. This is exactly how it looks. The building I've done here is perhaps a little wide as you look at it. Having gone back to reference images and moved around the place a little bit, it's maybe a little wide, but it is this just grey concrete building with these huge red conal tops on them, and it's sort of cuts very much between the sort of crenellations of the castle and then just like normal roofs, and then there's a building to the one side of it here that's just looks like some sort of office and on the other side of the building is the gift store that you exit through. It's a classic sort of exit through the gift shop, and again, all of this is for the most part a recreation. What I'm doing here is the first glow up of the series. So at the moment there is a moat that runs along the front of the castle, and it leads down to an area with a shallow pool and a statue that we'll get to in a moment. The other end of the moat, I'm actually really struggling to find actual pictures of it. The Google Maps doesn't quite go up to there, and it's very heavily foliaged, so I'm struggling to find exactly what it looks like, but I'm pretty sure it just goes to like a vent that lets some water out. There's no sort of prettiness over here, and then there's also an access road that goes into the park for deliveries and what have you that you'll just sort of see us move out in a moment. So I thought the first thing I wanted to do is make the flow of water a little bit more of a feature. So rather than just having this vent that just sort of pumps water down, we're building out a little fountain with some rockwork and having it just be a slightly nicer place to sit. There's an area at the front of the park that has a few picnic benches on, and we'd sort of develop that into more of a sort of static area that people can come and sit if they're waiting for people. Say that you have a family in 2 or 3 cars and you're all arriving separately to have a day here. There's a space now that you can come and sort of congregate and meet up. And also they do a lot of school trips to this place as well. So this would be a great place to sort of gather the kids to get them all sort of back onto the bus. And wouldn't it be nicer to have a nice spot with some running water? Running water in parks is a great thing. Not only does it look nice, it sounds great, it also just helps sort of moisturate the air. Yes, I just made up the word moisturate, but I always feel like the air around water features is a little cooler, and it just sort of helps bring a little bit of nature into the place. And that leads me on to my second point of StoryBook Gardens, is that not only has the place sort of lost some of the storybook elements, it's lost some of the gardens as well. As the new developments have come in, a lot of the garden space has been removed for sort of large concrete pads for some rides. There's a various different sort of concrete pads throughout the place that are used for, like I say, for school trips, picnic areas and what have you. There are, scout groups come here, all of that kind of thing. But those areas could be still very nicely sort of nature, Nietzsche, as Mike and John so well put it, areas that I would like to kind of bring back in as well. Or even if we are having to have stone on the ground, let's try and get some more natural stones rather than just sort of concrete slabs everywhere. And that's kind of what I wanted to do with that water feature there, is just kind of bring a little bit of that nature, a little bit of that nature back into the space, so that we can make StoryBook Gardens both storybook and the gardens as well. The actual StoryBook Gardens is right in the middle of a beautiful municipal park called Springbank Gardens that runs alongside the River Thames. Yes, they weren't very original when they named stuff over here. And I really want to try and bring in some of that nature from the outside back into the place. The actual one does have a lot of nature elements. There is a beautiful pond inside that has koi in it, with an area that you can go and see them. We'll be replicating that in a later episode. But there's other spaces where the nature just has been stripped away a little bit, to bring in something like the splash pads or some of the rides or some of the fun spaces. And I feel like those two things shouldn't necessarily be mutually exclusive. Instead, they can work together pretty well, I think. Look at this, we're not only getting an entrance area in, we're getting our first ride in as well. Interestingly, there are 2 rides that are owned and operated by StoryBook Gardens that require tickets from StoryBook Gardens, but aren't inside StoryBook Gardens. Both the Carousel here, and then there is also a model train, or a miniature train, that runs from the other side of the parking lot that we have here. Now, whether or not we put that in, I'm not sure. We might even maybe look at repurposing the track and sending it around the StoryBook Gardens instead, although that's really pushing it towards a much bigger change than what I really have in mind. But what I might do is build the train station building, because it is literally the other side of the parking lot from here. And use that as the entrance for the guests as far as Planet Coaster is concerned. So then we can have the building still there, and people walking through it and walking through the parking lot. So that's what I might do, but we'll see. So the 2 rides on the outside of the building, but they are working alongside StoryBook. You do need tickets from StoryBook to use them. One of them being a classic sort of carousel. I've just placed it down here. Just how it is in the park. It's just it's there on its own. It's a movable one, although it doesn't get moved, and it just has this wire fencing around it. It doesn't have a beautiful carousel cover that I have come to know and love from North America, something that they don't really do in the UK that much, honestly. Most carousels are fairly open, but here in North America we have this tradition of these beautiful wooden carousel gazebos. So I think this might get a carousel gazebo in a future episode, but I wanted to sort of show you how it is now in situ, just to kind of really lean into the fact that this is a recreation, that we are then going to try and sort of pump some money into. But I don't see myself editing this initial building here too much. The only thing I might do is what I feel like it could do with in real life is a little bit of texture to the building. As it stands here now, you have these sort of real sort of sheer grey walls. The turrets there are these pure grey pillars. That's exactly how it is, and it looks in the game a little fake, a little plasticky. But that's how it is. Like there'll be reference images all through this video, sort of showing you what it looks like in real life. And as soon as the weather starts to get a bit nicer here, I'm going to be heading back down there to get some footage of it with this series in mind. It's like $8 just to go in and walk around, so I'm going to go and do that one day. Probably take Xander, much to his digress now, I'm sure, but we'll drag him around and he'll have fun in the splash pad, I bet. Yeah, so that's how it is, basically. The signage then on the way in, I am not doing a straight replica of the sign. One, I don't really like it. It's a bit early 90s. It's a bit cheesy. I could reimagine it as something. But honestly, this series is meant to be the sort of thing that I can get out a video of this once or twice a week, as opposed to Meanderville, which is going to be monthly. At best, honestly. Like the Meanderville episode, I'm hoping you love it when it comes out. There is loads of editing and research and references and like history of rides and stuff. You'll see. It'll be soon, but I'm not going to be able to keep that up on a regular thing. So I'm hoping this is the sort of series that we can stick to time lapses and just sort of play the game and get the videos out a little bit more regularly for you. So because of that, I don't want to go crazy with things like signage, interiors, all of that. That's very much a Meanderville thing. So here we're just using in-game fonts, still being creative with them, still trying to do something fun with them there. We've got the sort of border around the storybook, and it's close enough to the real-life sign that I'm happy enough with it. But for the most part, yeah, we're not going to be really looking at doing interiors here. Partly because there isn't that many interiors, honestly. This is mostly an outdoor park. Almost all of the food options are QSRs or quick service restaurants, meaning counters that you walk up to and then eat outside nearby. There is, interestingly, a Beaver Tails inside there, which is a chain of... I don't know what you'd even call them. It's kind of like a big donut, like a big flat donut that has toppings go on it. It's a bit of a Canadian sort of institution. They're pretty good. But there's one of those built inside, and I assume the rent from that just sort of helps fund the place and what have you. So we will definitely look at doing that kind of thing, and we may look at adding in something a little bit more sort of permanent as food options, because at the moment, like I say, it's basically 2 or 3 sheds that that they sell hot dogs out of. So definitely sort of thing we might look at expanding on as part of our glow up in this series. But there we have the entrance to StoryBook Gardens. For the most part, a pretty much replica of what's there now, because honestly this is one of the better bits of the park, this beautiful sort of knockoff Disney castle that you walk up to in the middle of a beautiful park in London, Ontario. So we haven't changed it too much, but as we move on, I'll be showing you what the original looks like, what the actual one looks like, and then we'll be developing it with newer rides, higher budget, and a little bit more sort of presence of mind when it comes to the theming of the areas and bringing back in some of that nature. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you've enjoyed this one. It's a little bit different from me, so I've never done a recreation before, so I really hope you enjoy this one. Thank you so much for joining me on this one. Please give the video a like, subscribe if you're not already, all that YouTube stuff. I always forget to do it, and all YouTube ever does is scream at me about doing it. Make sure you tell people to subscribe. So here we go. This is me telling you to subscribe. Love you all to bits. Until the next one, be good.